Hopefully, you're beginning to see that opportunities for innovation really are everywhere. You just need to actively look for change. Because the unexpected is a direct symptom of change, it's the most reliable source of innovation and generally the easiest to find. However, our next source is also ripe with opportunity, and that source is what Drucker calls incongruities. Incongruities are basically things that just don't make sense. They don't feel right. As an example, consider healthcare in the United States. In 2008, the U.S. spent over $7,500 per person on healthcare, twice as much as 11 other highly developed countries. You'd think the U.S. would have the best healthcare outcomes in the world. Think again. As of 2013, this is not the case. By almost any measure, America lags behind. When you hear that America spends more than any other country on health care, but receives significantly worse care, your reaction is likely, that doesn't make sense. But next, you should think, there's an opportunity for innovation here. In order to turn an incongruity into an opportunity, a few things need to be true. First, a solution to the incongruity needs to be clearly definable within existing known technologies. If the solution to the problem requires a large amount of research and new knowledge is still necessary to solve the problem, then the incongruity isn't ripe for innovation. Second, the solution can't be too complicated. A complex solution to a confusing problem will only lead to additional confusion. A simple solution to a confusing problem is innovation at its best. Note, for these two conditions to be true, you'll likely need a strong knowledge of the industry you're examining. As with searching for the unexpected, you'll need to be looking in areas you know best. With that in mind, let's talk about what kinds of incongruities are out there. The first is an incongruity with economic reality. For instance, the demand for a product is growing, but firms aren't profitable. The economics say one thing, but the actual performance says another. Industry insiders should have the best insight, yet some things still make no sense. As we saw with expenditures on health care in the U.S., dollars do not always equal the expected outcome. However, the actual performance says the opposite. This is the kind of incongruity with economic realities that entrepreneurs flock to, as demonstrated by the enormous amounts of money and innovative ideas that are pouring into the industry. Southwest Airlines is a good example of how an entrepreneur can take advantage of this incongruity, and we'll be talking much more about Southwest in later lectures. The next type of incongruity is the distinction between reality and our assumptions about it. This is actually a fairly easy incongruity to spot, as something is factually wrong. The hard part tends to be understanding the true nature of the incongruity. It requires deep industry knowledge and understanding. The field of microlending, invented by the Nobel Prize winner Muhammad Yunus, is a good example. After much fanfare, empirical studies determined microlending was not at all it was cracked up to be. Notwithstanding all the favorable publicity, the actual loan programs were not impacting the economic situation of most borrowers. Microfinance was an idea envisioned by Muhammad Yunus that allowed individuals who couldn't get access to credit the ability to obtain small loans. The idea was that many poor individuals were stuck in a poverty trap, and with a small loan they could invest in a small business that would help pull them out of poverty. For years, microfinance was assumed to be highly effective at raising individuals out of poverty. However, in the late 2000s, an incongruity was found between reality and the assumptions about microfinance. In a series of randomized trials, microfinance wasn't shown to have the effect that was previously assumed. In one trial, while microfinance did have an effect on the number of business owners, it resulted in many structural changes. One example is the funneling of microloans to enterprises as opposed to individuals in an effort to create employment on a broader scale. The third type of incongruity, and possibly the most prevalent, is the incongruity between perceived and actual customer or user values and expectations. Too often, entrepreneurs provide products or services they want or need to sell rather than those things users actually value. Again, borrowing from history, in 1957, Ford Motor Company announced the Edsel, a new car they were so excited about they named it for Henry Ford's son. The Edsel was the outgrowth of years of research and development on the part of Ford's engineers. It flopped as soon as it debuted because no one wanted to drive it. This pattern repeats itself in both the commercial and social sectors. We'll talk much more about this in our next module, but generally this comes from the misguided belief that I know what the customer wants. To know what the customer wants, you need to listen to the customer. If you're in the office and not constantly talking to your customers, you'll likely have an incongruity between what your customer wants and what you think they want. As an example, most people assume that people want to be connected to their phone 24 hours a day. They want to be able to check their email, surf the web, and receive messages at any time and any place. A colleague and friend created an app called Freedom that essentially allows you to turn off your email and web access for a set number of hours every day so you can actually get some work done. When he first told me about it, it seemed loony. But he saw an incongruity I didn't. He created the program, put it online, and now has over 300,000 paying users. The other day I had lunch with him, and at the end of lunch he said, "While we're having lunch, I added 100 users." The last type of incongruity that can be exploited is an incongruity within the rhythm or logic of a process. This is the part of a process that everyone hates, but no one's bothered to fix. It's like a pebble in your shoe. Eventually, you don't notice it until someone takes it out for you. That's the opportunity you're seeking. For instance, mailing non-standard items was easy, except for figuring out the postage, which required a trip to the post office. You can now weigh your package at home and print out a stamp on a printer. Likewise, checking out at the grocery store wasn't a problem, unless you needed to purchase one or two items, and there were long lines waiting for an open cashier. You can now check yourself out. And filing taxes, well, there's still an incongruity in that process, but TurboTax has made it a lot easier.